It was 2025 and Earth stood on the brink of a new age, the kind that had only existed in the minds of dreamers and scientists for centuries. Humanity had reached the point where the impossible became possible. The boundaries of space no longer felt distant and unreachable. After years of technological advancement, the human race was finally ready to make its mark on the cosmos. There was a sense of unity in the air, something that transcended borders and governments. The entire world had one singular goal: to send a message to the stars. In a highly secured facility, deep within the heart of the world's most advanced space agency, Elena Alvarez stood before a massive array of computers and monitors. As her fingers flew over the keys, she wasn't the only one in the room, but she was the lead scientist behind the mission, the first true attempt to communicate with extraterrestrial life. It had taken years to prepare, but the day had finally come. The message was simple but profound, designed to represent humanity in the most concise way possible. The data was encoded in patterns and frequencies meant to be understood by any intelligent species that could pick it up. "We are here, we are human, we seek peace and knowledge." The words would be broadcast through a specially designed quantum signal aimed at the farthest reaches of space. Elena could feel the weight of the moment as she looked at her colleagues, one by one, their faces reflecting a mixture of awe and apprehension. She couldn't blame them. They were all thinking the same thing. Was their life out there? Were they truly alone in the vastness of the universe? As the final confirmation was given, Elena pressed the button, sending the message out into the void, a wave of energy that traveled through the fabric of space itself. The signal would take years to reach distant stars, but the hope was that some civilization somewhere would receive it and perhaps respond. They had no idea if the aliens would even understand or recognize the message. But that wasn't the point. The point was that humanity was no longer confined to the small blue planet it had come from. Across the world, people gathered in front of screens glued to live broadcasts, waiting for news, waiting for something to happen. There were celebrations and cheers as the news spread and excitement filled the air. But in the back of their minds, everyone knew it was only the beginning. The waiting game had begun. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months as the world waited eagerly for any kind of response from the stars. Elena's team worked tirelessly, monitoring the signal and tracking any possible signs of alien communication. But days turned into weeks, and the silence was deafening. No reply came, not even a faint whisper from the cosmos. At first, it wasn't cause for concern. Everyone expected delays. Perhaps the aliens were studying the message, or they needed time to process it. But as the months dragged on, doubts began to creep in. Was there anyone out there, or had humanity just sent its first and only message into the void? Rumors started to spread. Some said that the aliens were already observing humanity. Others claimed the message was too simplistic or too forward to be understood. But the truth was, no one really knew. No one could explain the silence, and that uncertainty hung over the world like a cloud, slowly dampening the initial wave of hope that had swept across the globe. Elena kept working. She refused to believe that the message had failed. After all, how could it have failed when it was so perfect, so carefully crafted? But deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Weeks passed, and the silence grew heavier. It was as if the universe itself had forgotten to reply to humanity's bold declaration. Elena continued her work, but with a growing sense of unease. Every day brought more unanswered questions. The team monitored the frequencies obsessively, hoping for even the faintest signal of a response. But each passing day seemed to drag the uncertainty deeper into their minds. People began to notice the lack of progress. As well, governments began to question the value of continuing the search for extraterrestrial life. Was this really worth the resources and the hope they had placed into this one moment? There were whispers in the media too. Some of the most respected voices in science began to entertain the possibility that humanity might be alone in the universe. Perhaps they were too small, too insignificant to make an impact on the grand scale of space and time. Maybe the cosmos was simply empty, or worse, maybe civilizations that had come before had tried to reach out only to disappear without a trace. But Elena refused to give up. She spent every waking moment at her desk running simulations, checking the data again and again. The signal was too strong, too powerful to have simply been ignored. There had to be an explanation for the silence. But every new theory only led to more questions. There was no rational reason why the message hadn't been answered, and that uncertainty began to gnaw at her. Her obsession with solving the puzzle intensified. She couldn't let go of the belief that the universe was still out there waiting for humanity to make contact. The team worked in isolation. As the world outside seemed to lose interest, their breakthroughs became smaller and less significant in the eyes of the public. The excitement had faded into skepticism, and doubt. Elena grew frustrated. She had seen it in her colleagues. Their enthusiasm had turned into resignation. They stopped pushing the boundaries of what was possible. They stopped looking for answers. The silence had already taken its toll on their spirits. But then something unexpected happened. One morning, Elena was at her desk going over the latest data when she noticed a slight anomaly in the signal. It was so subtle at first she almost dismissed it, but there was a pattern within the static, a rhythmic pulse that didn't belong, a slight deviation in the background radiation that didn't match any natural phenomena. She quickly ran it through the decoding system, and as the machine hummed to life, her heart began to race. The anomaly was too structured to be random. It was too intentional to be ignored. Elena called her team together urgently. The room was filled with a buzz of excitement. As they stared at the screen, the pulse grew stronger, and the data began to shift slowly, revealing a complex sequence of numbers and symbols none of them had ever seen before. The breakthrough was small but significant enough to make Elena's heart pound with hope. The silence had been broken. It wasn't a full message, but it was something that hinted that their original signal had indeed been received. Perhaps the aliens had simply been waiting for the right time, or perhaps they had been trying to figure out how to respond after all this time. Elena didn't dare get her hopes up just yet, but the presence of the signal, this coded response, could be the key to unraveling the mystery of what had happened to those who had come before humanity. What force could be behind the cosmic silence that had swallowed every previous attempt at communication? It was just the beginning, but it felt like a lifeline, and for the first time in months, Elena allowed herself a small spark of hope. Maybe they weren't alone after all. The days that followed were a blur of intense work and sleepless nights. Elena and her team dove into the newly discovered signal with an energy that had been lacking for months. As they began decoding the strange sequence, it became clear that this wasn't just a random fluctuation in the noise. It was a message, and it was pointing them somewhere, but to what or whom they couldn't yet say. At first it seemed like fragments, a few coded numbers, and strange symbols that didn't align with anything humans had encountered before. Elena couldn't help but wonder how this alien intelligence had communicated in such a deliberate way, so advanced yet somehow familiar. She spent hours cross-referencing the data with everything they had on record, but nothing fit. She had to admit to herself that this message wasn't just a response to their original transmission. It was something entirely new and uncharted. By the fifth day of analysis, they had a breakthrough. They realized the coded symbols weren't just random bits of data. They were patterns that could be translated into a form of language, a language that wasn't human, but had a structure so clear and precise. It was almost as if it had been waiting to be discovered. One by one, the symbols began to make sense. Each part of the message revealed more details, a direction, a warning, a promise. The first complete sentence they managed to decode sent a chill down Elena's spine. "We've heard you, but you will never hear back." Her breath caught in her throat, and the room fell silent for a moment. The message wasn't just a cold response, it was final. It carried a weight of inevitability, as though the alien civilization had long ago accepted their fate and were trying to warn humanity of the same terrible truth. Elena stared at the decoded words on the screen, unsure of how to proceed. She had expected excitement at their discovery, but instead she felt a sinking feeling in her stomach. This wasn't the hopeful reply she had envisioned. It was more like a stone wall that had been placed between humanity and whatever lay beyond. "What does it mean?" one of her colleagues asked hesitantly. The words seemed too final, too absolute to comprehend. "It means..." Elena's voice faltered for a moment before she gathered herself. "It means that whatever happened to the others, it's happened to them too. They've tried to communicate just like us. And they were cut off." Her mind raced as she pieced it together. If these aliens had sent a message and received no reply, then it wasn't just isolation they faced. It was a far more ominous force, something that prevented contact between civilizations. But why? What could silence the universe itself? The team worked feverishly to decode more of the message, but it was fragmented and incomplete, as if it had been sent in a hurry. Yet enough came through to reveal something staggering. It is too late for us, but you may still survive. Be silent. Be patient. The alien race wasn't just warning humanity. They were urging them to remain unnoticed, to lay low and survive. The implications were staggering. Was there something out there that destroyed civilizations for attempting to contact others? Something that didn't care for who they were, only that they had reached out. The silence that followed in the room was thick with a shared understanding of the gravity of their discovery. The words echoed in Alina's mind, repeating in a haunting loop. Be silent. Be patient. It was as if they were being told that humanity's greatest strength, its curiosity, was also its greatest weakness. Alina looked around the room at her team, their faces pale with disbelief. The hope they had felt just days ago seemed a distant memory now. They had cracked the code, but instead of the answers they had dreamed of, they were confronted with a terrifying truth. This wasn't just about making contact. It was about survival. We need to keep this quiet, Alina said slowly, her voice trembling with the weight of the realization. Whatever this is, it's bigger than us. We don't know what's out there, but we can't ignore this message. The room was silent for a moment longer before her colleagues began to nod grimly, understanding the seriousness of the situation. The universe had just revealed a terrifying secret, and humanity's future now depended on how they responded to it. The following days felt like a blur of uncertainty and fear as Alina and her team continued to decode the alien message, each new fragment revealing a little more of the dark truth they had uncovered. The warning was unmistakable. Every civilization that had ever attempted to reach out had been wiped out, and those that had survived had done so by staying silent, by erasing their presence from the universe. The force behind this cosmic erasure was both terrifying and unexplainable. It was not a weapon. It was an unavoidable consequence of existence, a cosmic law that punished civilizations for their ambition, for their desire to connect with others. Alina found herself haunted by the words of the message. It is too late for us, but you may still survive. Be silent. Be patient. They were a plea, a final effort to prevent humanity from making the same mistake. Yet, as the days went on, Alina couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this message than just survival. Something about the warning felt personal, as though the alien civilization had known that they were doomed long before they sent their own message. They had resigned themselves to their fate, but had they given humanity the chance to avoid it? The pressure of knowing this truth weighed heavily on Alina's mind. She couldn't keep this information to herself. It was too important. But the question remained, what would happen if the rest of the world knew? Would humanity listen, or would they ignore the warning and continue reaching for the stars, unaware of the unseen forces waiting to extinguish them? Could they be saved, or was the cycle inevitable? The decision was not hers alone to make. Alina called a meeting with the world's top scientists, diplomats, and leaders. They gathered in a secure conference room, and for the first time, Alina felt the full weight of their expectations bearing down on her. The fate of humanity now rested on what they chose to do next. She explained everything, the message, the warning, and the pattern they had uncovered. It wasn't an easy conversation. The room was filled with disbelief, shock, and fear. Many questioned the validity of the message, unable to accept the possibility that such a vast, unknowable force existed out there, waiting for the right moment to strike. Some argued that they should continue to explore, to send more messages, to press forward with their quest for knowledge. The idea of being silenced, of staying hidden from the cosmos, felt like a surrender to them. They couldn't accept the notion that they should stop reaching out. But others, those with a more pragmatic mindset, agreed with Alina's assessment. The evidence was clear. The silence was not random, and the force that had eradicated so many civilizations was real. It was not a question of whether humanity could survive, but of whether they would choose to play by the universe's unspoken rules or fight against them, risking everything. After hours of heated discussion, a consensus began to form. The world would continue to explore, but cautiously. They would search for answers without drawing attention to themselves. The message would remain a secret for now. They would not tell the public. There was too much at stake. If the world knew that their very existence could be erased by some unseen force, panic would spread like wildfire. Alina felt a pang of guilt. She had hoped for a breakthrough, for a moment of triumph, but instead, they had uncovered a terrible truth. Humanity wasn't alone in the universe, but in many ways, that might have been a blessing. To be ignored, to be left alone, might have been humanity's only chance for survival. As the meeting concluded and the leaders filed out of the room, Alina remained seated, staring at the screen displaying the last fragment of the alien message. Be silent. Be patient. The universe was telling them to stop, to wait, and to survive. But how long could they hold on to that silence before they, too, were lost in the void? In the quiet aftermath, Alina knew that the battle had only just begun. It wasn't about knowledge anymore. It was about survival. And that meant making choices that could change the very course of human history. The decision to remain silent was not easy to accept, and the weeks that followed were filled with tension and uncertainty. The world's governments, though united in their decision to keep the message secret, knew that their actions would change everything. Humanity's exploration of space, once filled with excitement and ambition, now had a shadow hanging over it. The people of Earth were not yet ready to abandon their dreams of the stars, but there was a palpable sense that the race for the unknown had changed forever. Alina threw herself into her work, focusing on what they had learned from the alien message. Every day she combed through the data, hoping for a new revelation that might shed light on the mystery behind the cosmic force that had silenced so many civilizations. But each attempt to dig deeper into the message only led to more questions. Then, one morning, something unexpected happened. As Alina sat in front of her terminal, reviewing the latest readings from their monitoring equipment, a new signal appeared on the radar. It was faint at first, almost imperceptible, but as she adjusted the frequency, the signal grew clearer. Her heart skipped a beat. The pattern was familiar, too familiar. It was the same kind of coded signal they had detected from the alien message. Her pulse quickened as she realized what this could mean. It was not just another anomaly, but a ship, a craft of some kind, entering Earth's orbit. There was no mistaking it. The object was unlike anything humans had ever built. It was sleek, triangular, and seemed to emit no radiation, as if it was a perfect stealth vessel. It was an alien craft, but it wasn't responding to their message. It was waiting, hovering just beyond the atmosphere, as if observing. Alina rushed to gather her team. The atmosphere in the control room shifted instantly from tension to excitement. Everyone was on edge, unsure whether they were about to make the greatest discovery of their lives or whether they had unknowingly triggered something dangerous. The team's lead engineer, Marcus, began running simulations to determine the object's size and trajectory. "It's stationary," Marcus said, his voice shaking. "It hasn't moved since we first detected it. Whatever it is, it's not here to land." The silence in the room deepened as they all processed the implications of this discovery. The craft wasn't just a passive observer. It had arrived, seemingly aware of humanity's signal. But it wasn't here to communicate. It was waiting. For what? Alina ordered that all communication frequencies be opened, just in case the alien ship was trying to make contact. But there was nothing. No sign of communication. No response to their attempts at outreach. The craft continued to hover, motionless, as if studying Earth from a distance. Every scan revealed nothing. No life signs, no internal structure, just the presence of an alien vessel. As the hours passed, the team grew restless. Alina could feel her heart racing. Something was wrong. The craft's stillness felt ominous. It was almost as if it were part of a larger pattern, a cosmic game. If the message they had received was any indication, the ship's presence was not a good omen. The alien civilization that had tried to warn them had left behind only cryptic words. "You will never hear back." The question now was this vessel part of that same force that erased civilizations for reaching out? Was it watching them, waiting to see what humanity would do next? Elena stood at the window of the control room, staring out at the distant, unmoving craft in the sky. It was close, but not close enough to interact with. The silence was suffocating. She could feel the weight of the warning they had received pressing down on her, suffusing every part of her being. The universe was vast and full of mysteries, but humanity's pursuit of answers had now led them to the doorstep of something unknown, something far older and more dangerous than they had ever imagined. She had hoped for a breakthrough, but now she wasn't sure whether they were witnessing the beginning of the end or simply the next chapter of an endless cosmic cycle. Days passed, and the alien craft remained in orbit, still and silent. Elena and her team were growing more and more uneasy. The object showed no signs of life, no indication that it was hostile, yet its very presence felt like a looming shadow. Every day they monitored it, running scans and hoping for some sign of action, but nothing changed. The craft didn't move, didn't respond. It simply existed in the same spot above Earth. It was as though it was waiting for something. In the meantime, the world continued to react to the initial discovery. News of the craft's appearance leaked out, sparking mass hysteria and excitement. People were both terrified and intrigued, unsure whether to see this as a herald of invasion or a peaceful first contact. Governments scrambled to assess the situation, issuing statements that they were in control, that they would protect the planet. But Elena knew better. They were no longer in control of this situation. The silence was unbearable. Then, finally, after nearly 2 weeks of tense observation, the alien vessel made its first move. But it wasn't what Elena had expected. The craft didn't land, nor did it attempt to establish communication. Instead, it emitted a single pulse of energy, a ripple that spread outwards, cutting across Earth's communication systems in an instant. It wasn't a weapon, at least not in the way humanity understood weapons. It was far more subtle, far more disconcerting. The pulse sent a wave of disruption across all electronic systems, causing massive outages worldwide. Satellites malfunctioned. Communications between nations became sporadic, and for a moment, the planet seemed to fall into a state of chaos. It wasn't an attack. It was a warning, one more unsettling than any missile could ever be. Elena stared at the data in disbelief. This wasn't a hostile move. This was a signal, an interruption, perhaps, but a signal nonetheless. The aliens hadn't come to destroy. They had come to make their presence known, to remind humanity of the boundaries they had crossed. The message was clear. We are watching. We will not allow you to go further. What do we do now? Marcus asked, his voice shaking as he looked at the monitors. Do we try to communicate with them again? What does this mean? Elena paused, her mind racing. The data was too complex to understand in its entirety, but there was one undeniable truth now. The aliens had been waiting for something. They had waited while humanity reached out with hope and curiosity. But now, it seemed, they were waiting for a response. A response that, Elena realized with growing fear, humanity was not ready to give. The pulse from the craft was a kind of cosmic reset, a reminder of the universal rules that governed life in the galaxy. It was a signal that civilizations could not afford to reach out without dire consequences. The message was not just a warning. It was a reminder that humanity was too young, too naive to play with forces beyond their understanding. We don't know what they want, Elena said quietly, turning to face the room. But this pulse, it wasn't meant to harm us. It's meant to show us that we've been noticed, that they've been watching. Her words hung heavy in the air, and for the first time, the full weight of the situation hit her. This wasn't just a breakthrough or a moment of triumph. It was a cosmic confrontation, one that challenged everything humanity had built its future upon. They had reached out into the stars, and now the stars had reached back, but not with the warm embrace of peaceful contact. Instead, they had been met with the cold silence of something much older, much wiser, and much more dangerous. Elena's thoughts raced. She couldn't help but think of the warning from the alien message. "It is too late for us, but you may still survive." What did that mean? What had happened to the aliens who sent that message? Why had they failed? Was this craft a remnant of their civilization, or had it come from somewhere else entirely? The team continued their work, scrambling to gather more data, but the longer the craft lingered, the more Elena began to feel a sinking sensation. This was no longer just about exploration or discovery. It was about survival. Humanity had reached beyond its limits, and now the universe had noticed. The question remained, would they survive this first contact, or would they fall into the same trap that had ensnared so many before them? With each passing day, it seemed like the answers were becoming more elusive, and the stakes higher than ever. The days stretched on, and with each passing hour, the alien craft remained fixed in its position above Earth, an unblinking sentinel in the sky. Despite the apparent calm, Elena felt a growing sense of urgency. The disruption caused by the pulse had been contained for the most part, but the deeper implications of what had happened were slowly beginning to sink in. The pulse had not just affected communication systems. It had felt like a warning to the entire planet, a sign that humanity's reach had gone too far. Elena sat in the control room, surrounded by her team, as they sifted through the data once more. They had been receiving sporadic bursts of information from the alien vessel, but each transmission was cryptic and fragmented. The complexity of the signals was beyond anything humanity had encountered before. Yet there was a pattern emerging, one that hinted at something far more disturbing. "We're missing something," Elena said, frustration creeping into her voice as she ran her fingers through her hair. "The signals are deliberate. They're not random, not accidental. But there's no clear message in them. It's like they're waiting for us to respond, but we don't have the language to answer." A somber silence fell over the room as her words settled in. The aliens had clearly been watching them for longer than they realized, and their current silence was part of some larger game. But what did they want? Was this craft just a messenger, a scout sent to observe? Or was it something else entirely, part of a larger force that had been set into motion long ago? "We're dealing with something far older than we are," Marcus said quietly, his voice tinged with awe and fear. "They've been out there, watching us, and waiting for us to make a mistake. They knew we'd try to reach out." Elena nodded. She knew that Marcus was right, but the implications were even worse than that. The alien race had already failed. They had already made the same mistakes that humanity was now on the verge of repeating. Whatever force had silenced them was still out there, still active, and it was just a matter of time before humanity was caught in its wake. The thought of it, an invisible, unstoppable force, lurking in the void of space, sent a shiver down her spine. It was like a cosmic law that no civilization could escape. It was as if the universe itself was determined to prevent intelligent species from making contact, from reaching out to others. But why? What was the purpose behind this universal silence? Elena's thoughts were interrupted by a sudden alert on the screen. The alien craft had shifted position. It wasn't moving in the traditional sense. Rather, it had expanded, as though the craft itself had opened or transformed in some way. The structure that had once seemed so still and passive was now active, sending out a series of signals in rapid succession. It was almost as if it were communicating directly with them. Finally, at long last, it was responding. Elena leaned forward, her pulse quickening. The signals were different this time. Clearer, more focused. They still didn't understand the full meaning behind them, but there was something unmistakably deliberate about the patterns. It was almost as though the aliens were inviting them to listen, to understand. Or perhaps it was a test, a challenge. "Are we ready to make contact?" Elena asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "We can try," Marcus replied, his fingers hovering over the controls. But we still don't know how they'll react. We don't know what they expect from us. There was a heavy pause in the room. For the first time in weeks, Alina allowed herself to consider the possibility that this could be the moment that would change everything. This could be the breakthrough humanity had been waiting for, or it could be the moment that sealed their fate. The alien craft was offering them something, but what? Understanding. An ultimatum. A chance for survival. With a deep breath, Alina nodded. We have to try. If we don't respond, we'll never know. We need to understand what they want before it's too late. The team worked quickly, sending out a carefully calculated transmission in return. It wasn't much, just a simple signal, a request for communication. They had no idea what the aliens would make of it, but they had no other choice. The silence that had followed humanity's first message had been deafening, and now the universe was demanding an answer. As the transmission was sent, Alina stood at the window, looking up at the sky. The alien ship loomed above, as still as ever, but there was something different now. The silence had shifted. It was no longer just a void. It was a space filled with possibility, with danger, and with hope. But the question remained, would the universe give humanity the chance to answer? Or would this final communication be the last they ever sent? The transmission was sent, and for what felt like an eternity, there was nothing. No response, no change in the stillness of the craft above Earth. The seconds dragged on, each one heavier than the last. Alina stood frozen, staring up at the monitor, waiting for some indication that their message had been received. Every member of her team was on edge, barely breathing, watching for any sign that the alien ship would react. Then, just as they were beginning to lose hope, it came. A pulse. Faint at first, but growing stronger. It wasn't the chaotic ripple of energy they'd felt before. It was deliberate, rhythmic, almost like the heartbeat of the ship itself. Alina's breath caught in her throat as the pulses intensified, each one a clear signal, like the ship was answering them. It wasn't just a random occurrence, it was communication. The monitor flickered, and an image began to form. It wasn't much, just a shifting pattern of light and shadow. But as the lines became clearer, Alina's heart pounded in her chest. It wasn't a language they recognized, but it was unmistakable. The ship was trying to show them something. There were symbols, geometric shapes, and waves of energy that seemed to respond to the transmission they had sent. Slowly, the image began to make sense. One of the team members gasped. "It's a map," they whispered. "A star map. It's pointing us to something." The realization hit Alina like a tidal wave. The aliens weren't just reaching out to stop them. They were offering something. A guide, a path to something greater. Perhaps it was the key to understanding the force that had silenced so many civilizations before them. Maybe it was a way to navigate the cosmos without falling victim to the same fate. But the map was incomplete, like a puzzle with missing pieces. It showed distant stars, galaxies that had been marked for exploration, but there were gaps, dark areas that the aliens had purposefully left blank. They weren't just showing the way forward, they were warning them. There were paths that humanity should never take. Alina's mind raced as she processed the information. The aliens had been through this before. They had sent their own message to the stars, only to face the consequences of their own ambitions. Now they were giving humanity a chance to avoid the same tragic fate. But what did it mean for Earth's future? Could humanity stay silent long enough to avoid the cosmic punishment that had befallen so many before them? For a brief moment, Alina considered the weight of their choices. The message was clear. Humanity had been warned. The alien craft was not an invader. It was a teacher, a guide, and a warning all rolled into one. And now, it was up to humanity to decide whether they would follow the path laid out before them or risk everything in pursuit of an uncertain future. The pulses from the ship intensified, and the map began to shift, revealing new information. A planet, one that looked eerily similar to Earth, flashed on the screen. It was far beyond the reach of their current technology, located in a distant corner of the galaxy. Alina's breath caught. Was this where the aliens had once thrived? Had they found this world, only to lose it to the forces that had wiped them out? The final pulse came, sending a shockwave through the room. The map disappeared, replaced by a single phrase, a final warning. To reach out is to risk. To wait is to survive. Alina's heart sank as the weight of those words settled over her. The universe had its rules, and those who broke them paid the price. It wasn't just about reaching for the stars. It was about surviving long enough to understand the rules of the cosmos. Humanity stood on the precipice of greatness, but it also stood at the edge of a vast, uncharted abyss. As the alien ship's presence in Earth's orbit began to fade, its light dimming as if retreating into the void, Alina knew that the world had been irrevocably changed. The message had been received, but the future was uncertain. Would humanity heed the warning, or would they push forward, driven by the same curiosity that had brought them this far? Only time would tell. But one thing was clear: humanity was no longer alone in the universe. They had made contact. Now they would have to learn whether they were ready for what lay beyond the stars, or whether they would fall like those who had come before them. The silence returned, but this time it was different. It wasn't empty. It was filled with the weight of a choice yet to be made. And as Alina watched the stars, she knew that humanity's greatest journey was only just beginning.